All right, folks, welcome back. Harmless Dave here over on the Radical Independent with my good friend Charles Anderson, who is in his own right a great video guy, although he hasn't done a lot of videos lately, but I'm hoping he'll start doing them again because he's got the working man's perspective. We had him on last week or the week before, and it was a pretty good video. And so I'm happy to welcome back Charles Anderson. Charles, how are you, buddy?
Doing pretty good. It's a freezing day here in South Carolina, but it's a Saturday. I'm glad to finally be off work for a couple of days. Um, as far as the video stuff goes, man, I'm working on getting back into it. Schedule's been pretty crazy. Me and you were talking about some stuff before we started recording, but it's getting there. It's getting there.
Yeah. Well, a couple of people were asking me, hey, how come you have Charles on? And I go, number one, we used to do this a while back, and Charles and I had a lot of great conversations, and we covered a lot of topics. And, I think Charles is the epitome of an independent thinker, and he's not part of a political tribe. He's like me at this point. We don't really trust any of it. And we are just, like I said to Charles prior, we're calling balls and strikes, and I would rather have Charles Anderson as my umpire, than a lot of people out there, because he's not gonna be looking at this through a left lens or a right lens. He's just gonna be looking at it through a clear lens. So, Charles, thanks for being here again, buddy.
Thank you for having me on again, Dave.
All right, so I wanted to talk about this train derailment thing. It's everywhere. The conspiracy theories are flying all over the place. Charles, what is this about? Is this about infrastructure? Is it about another government cover up with the toxic chemicals going into the atmosphere? They've got rivers that are polluted. You got fish, schools of fish just going belly up and floating down the river. And apparently, whatever this is, this fallout, I hate to use that word because it sounds like a nuclear thing, but it's got some similarities to it. The fallout itself is floating down the Ohio River. I don't know where it's going to end up, if it's going to, magically dissipate over time. What's your take on all of this, Charles? Let's get the South Carolinian perspective here.
Well, first and foremost, this is definitely going to be a disaster on the environment. It's already been a disaster, but I don't think that the lasting effects of it are to be taken lightly, because this is going to cause problems for some time to come, from what I can tell. But first, if you go back, when I was studying up on this topic, if you go back about 15 years, maybe a little longer, there were apparently a span of some train derailments. And at the time, Obama was in office. Okay. And basically he came out with a proposal to start going to more of an anything carrying potentially toxic chemical or flammable chemical, something like that. They were going to have to get these more modern electric brakes on the train, because apparently the majority of these trains, whether like Norfolk Southern, which was the company who owned the train in this particular incident, they have these old air brakes, and the technology, more or less from what I can gather, dates all the way back to like post-Civil War era. Okay, so that's how old we're talking here. So to be more safe for modern times, this was a regulation that was proposed to be put in place. Okay. Even Norfolk Southern, before they started lobbying against the mandate of these electronic brakes, touted how much safer they would be. But of course, just like everything else, politics, the corruption comes in, the lobbyists come in, the special interests come in. They're like, how about if we make this a little more narrow? Maybe let's don't incorporate it into all these different, because look, that's a lot of money. We're going to have to upgrade all these trains or buy new trains. So basically, yeah, politics went to work, special interests went to work, and the regulation got whittled down to where it was just this one little set group. Now, for the people who have been blaming Donald Trump, That is because when Trump came into office, the little bit that was put into place by the Obama administration, Trump basically threw out the window. Okay, so it's like, yeah, now there's no restrictions. They just have whatever. So it's back to the way it was prior to all this. But it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's not an Obama or a Trump issue. Both sides played their own role. Trump is not the president anymore. Joe Biden is the president.
Yeah.
And his transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, has a proposal on his desk, from my understanding right now, that would call for there to be less testing on these brakes for freight trains, basically. Now, this is the Democrat. Yeah. This is Joe Biden. Okay. So this is not a Donald Trump issue. It's not this is politics. Okay. This is the deep state, the swamp. Okay. That's what we're dealing with here. And on top of that, I'm going to be the most progressive president since FDR, Joe Biden. Okay. This is the same guy who just came in and voted to shut down, but basically come in and bust up the union stuff on the railroad workers towards the end of last year, right? This is the same guy. And over what? Because they wanted a pay increase and they wanted so many days of paid sick leave. Now, I don't know, but to me, you're operating pretty important equipment. If you're carrying around a lot of chemicals that could become toxic, if you got the flu, I would rather you just be able to take that day off than go out there and put people at risk. Okay? Because this is serious stuff that we're dealing with right now. And, the government wants to send billions of dollars around the world, but here we see another example of where people right here in their own country just want a little bit better standard. And no, you can't have that. So corporate interest doesn't want to pay it out. They bought the politician, so the politician uses their power and puts a stop to it. I mean, it's absolutely, stupid. But, and again, it goes across both sides of the aisle. One other thing that I heard was Trump also signed in when he was president to allow these freight trains to carry containers of natural gas through some more suburban areas. And according to studies, if that were to derail and cause an explosion, roughly about 20 cars worth of natural gas going off that way, the study showed would be about the equivalent explosion, like the force of the explosion would be about the equivalent of the Hiroshima bomb.
Wow.
And this is going through potentially your backyard. Okay. That's why this stuff wasn't supposed to go through more residential type areas in the past. So, Republicans, libertarians, I'm with them on a lot of things where they call for deregulation, but I'm not sure if this is one of the areas we need to be deregulating, Like there are some things that are put in place simply for safety protocols. Okay. And I'm not so sure that the safety protocol stuff is what we need to be going after as far as any kind of deregulation or anything. That's not really helping much. It's only going to potentially put us back in time and, potentially cause a problem. And I think this is a prime example of what all this deregulation on safety protocols can lead to if you go a little overboard with it.
Yeah. Well, really good points, Charles. And you focused on both how, Democrats more recently, you mentioned that Mayor Pete, who's really been under fire and deservedly so. Yeah. I mean, he's a little more concerned about, equity over at the Department of Transportation, making sure that, they have the proper number of people of a certain skin tone working, right, or certain preference, sexual preference, and so forth. This is where all of this sort of, I don't know what you call it, just kind of I'll call it neo-progressive, because it's not See, when I look at a progressive, a real progressive might want, like you mentioned, a living wage for a union worker, or decent benefits. You mentioned they've got a hazardous job, right? They've got a difficult job. So they should be paid accordingly, with that difficult job. And you shouldn't be, nickel and diming these people when it comes to pay increases, so long as they're doing a good job. And I'm sure, you do your annual review and so forth, and you figure out, hey, this person, they're working hard. We seem to really look down upon the working class in this country at this point, Charles. I mean, this accident happened in a very rural place in Ohio, by the way, who overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump in the last election. I mean, wasn't even close. And you mentioned that, Trump was maybe trying to cut some corners and Biden's trying to cut corners. So you get to that old expression that Bill O'Reilly used to say is, who's looking out for you? Who's looking out for the little guy? And I'm seeing more and more in this country where the little guy seems to be expendable. The people that make the country work, the people I admire, I'm not sitting around admiring, anybody in Hollywood. What I admire are people who wake up each day and, work hard, work like you do. You work long hours, and you probably should be paid more based on the amount of effort you're putting in, especially compared to a lot of the other people who, sit on the couch all day or are trying to kind of scam the system one way or another. And you're not. You're one of those working class guys. And the libertarians, the Republicans, the Democrats, again, they're focused more on their tribal victory. Like the Republicans are going to come along and say, hey, this, like you said, this happened under Biden. So it kind of is under Biden. So, if it happens under Biden, it is his problem currently. It's not Donald Trump's problem. And Republicans are going to come along and say, hey, Biden is slow and he didn't respond, and Pete Buttigieg is kind of a joke, and he kind of is. But it's back and forth, Charles. Who's coming in to actually fix the problem? Are the Republicans and Democrats united in getting over to East Palestine and helping these people and testing the soil and the water and the air? And, these people talk about compensation and talk about what their lives are probably going to be like going forward. And are we going to forget about this like they did in Flint? Remember? Very similar.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, the water in Flint, you can't drink it. Too bad. We'll see if we can fix it. We tried a couple times, didn't work. We'll test it again. Maybe you should buy bottled water. That's the solution. Maybe these people, you know what they might be saying, Charles? Maybe these people should move out of East Palestine and find a really, urban, upstanding kind of place where all of the more progressive thinkers are. And you know what I mean? It's like they should be living in this rural town anyway, because, all the cool stuff happens in the big city, and these people are just backward hicks and they don't know anything.
Yeah. The working class really is, a place without a home to go. We're people without a home. Once upon a time, the Democrat Party, and I know about this because I heard it a lot growing up. My grandfather on my mom's side was he grew up. FDR was the champion.
Yeah.
Okay. There were a lot of Southern Democrats who really loved the whole FDR model. Okay. Because, and if you go back and you look at that time in history, a lot of the farms and stuff had started drying up. Okay. There was big drought in the country, and, not only that, but then you had the whole stock market crash. So it was the Great Depression. It was a terrible time.
Right.
And FDR became the champion for a lot of working class people. Now, I've heard people come out and, well, they say he did this, but he didn't really do this. Look, all I can tell you is this was the perception of a lot of people who either grew up in the era or came right after it, and they were taught this by their parents. And I never heard my grandfather on my dad's side really talk much about politics, but I can tell you I did hear him mention at one point basically that Herbert Hoover was an abysmal president, and that when he was the president, it basically wrecked the country. Obviously, a lot of the homeless camps that came up, what today would be what, like a Newsom camp? They called them Hoovervilles.
Yeah, Hooverville
back in those
versus
days. Right.
Newsomville. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, that was the way it was back then. So the Democrats had the South. That's historically what not a lot of people realize. They had the South for all the way up until right around the late 1960s to 70s. Okay, right around the time the end of LBJ and Richard Nixon, and actually Richard Nixon came out and admitted he played up to a lot of the South to win. But the thing is, okay, the Democrats always tried to have that message for the working class people because they took money from the unions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that lasted all the way up until Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And then that's when that whole new Democrat thing came along. And then they're like, okay, well, we're going to get in bed with the same people who give money to the Republican Party, aside from just our unions who donate to us. We're going to hop into the same cesspool here, and we're going to be this nice, happy little moderate. We're not left, we're not right, we're somewhere in the middle. And the problem is they basically became the evil of both sides. And that continued and continued and continued. And even Chuck Schumer has come out and said that Democrats are not worried about losing blue collar, rural voters, because they said for every blue collar person that we lose, we'll pick up 2 white collar voters. Okay. Which is where all this instability and the working class has just been dumped on for so long. Obviously, the income gap has only widened and widened and widened over the years. And so, yeah, it's that now you see where you're at today, and working class people don't know where to go. And I said this in our last video, they're going to have to eventually realize that they're still the majority.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got the rich people who may own the business. They may be what keeps the gears turning, but they're not going to do crap without people to keep those gears turning for them. So they still have the numbers, and they're going to have to realize this isn't going to be an issue that can be won at a ballot box anymore. It's going to take, direct action of some sort. But back to your point. So, no, this isn't just Democrat or Republican. They're both bought off. Right. They've both changed. They're both following the same model. And if a third party ever came in and these same corruption elements are still around, they would be taken over the exact same way. Greed has been the downfall of many things over the years. And we've already seen the top 2 third parties that are out there now are not, these saints. Okay. Yeah. Look what happened with the Green Party last time. What a mess that turned into. We've seen what's been going on in times with the libertarians, and even your guest Scott Ritter. Look what he's having trouble with elements of the Libertarian Party. So party politics is just not going to get us anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, if you want to fight that battle, sure, it can't necessarily, I guess, hurt. But you're kind of spinning tires in the mud to just put all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
But ultimately, people are going to have to just stand up and say that they've had enough. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's going to take people getting out into the streets and taking the government back and saying, look, we're tired of you sending billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine or NATO or what. Like, look what we've got going on at home. $100 billion would have ended homelessness in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. The figure is like all you need is 20 billion, I think, Charles.
Yeah. I've heard some say up as high as 50, but even still, that's half of what we just sent to another country.
Yeah.
Okay. And no, I don't agree with all the violence that's going on in that part of the world. But the argument at the very least has to be made that it has potentially been instigated by the West and NATO continuing to expand further and further, which is something that the Warsaw Pact said wouldn't happen.
Right.
Okay. So this has all been instigated over time. And so the people who are in this country that go to work every day and they're paying taxes in, and we're the ones that are getting dumped on.
Yeah.
Food has gone crazy. And I don't think that there's any coincidence that you've got people like Bill Gates buying up all this farmland. Okay.
Yep.
So, you're on the verge of monopolies making a return.
Right.
The working conditions aren't getting better. Okay. And again, I think there's also, since we brought up Mayor Pete earlier, there's a huge contradiction with a guy who is over transportation, and these workers just want a little more paid sick leave. And yet this guy took a maternity leave for what, like 2 or 3 months?
Yeah.
For a newborn baby. So, I always grew up hearing this thing. Grandparents, even my parents have said before, but especially my grandparents. I'm sure you may have heard this before, Dave. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Okay. Yeah. And for those who may not be aware, because I'm South Carolina, so us Southern folk have our own unique way of speaking. So if you don't know what that means, it basically means what's good for you is what's good for me.
Right.
What makes you any better than me? Okay. First of all, you're in public office.
Yeah.
And traditionally, that was also referred to as a public servant. You're serving the people.
Yeah.
And yet you've got these cushy, just spectacular benefits that none of us get. Yet you're there to serve the will of the people. Now, how does that work? Dave, tell me one time you've ever read something in history where the servant has it better than the master.
Yeah.
Yet the politicians for decades have had it way better than their constituents. Okay. And the only thing that they've done when they got into office is make it better and better. But see, here, that's where the thing comes apart. They're supposed to serve the people.
Yeah.
But corruption has changed all that. They don't serve they serve certain people.
Yeah.
And the working class doesn't have the money to buy their time. Okay. So the only thing they do with the working class is they play politics with them. They move them around like pieces on a checkerboard or a chessboard. That's all they are. They're pawns. Okay. Yeah. We just sit there and play with you all day long for votes when it comes to an election. Right. And, we use the media to get out there and push this. Now, bringing up the media, because this is another very interesting fact that I came across. Okay.
Right.
Norfolk Southern is the company who owned the train that this happened in, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know who the largest shareholders for Norfolk Southern are?
I don't, but I'm glad you had, you researched that, and that's why we had you on, Charles.
From a little digging that I did, and I dug into this a little bit. So if this turns out to be incorrect for some reason, I will completely retract this. But from what I was able to dig up, and I would say just based on the optics alone, it makes perfect sense here.
Yeah.
But the Vanguard Group, BlackRock Fund Advisors, and State Street Global Advisors. Okay. Vanguard has about 8.04%. BlackRock has 4.57%. And State Street Global Advisors has about 4.46% in Norfolk Southern. Now, would you like to take a guess at some other entities that those same three groups are shareholders of?
Well, those three groups, from what I understand, they own a lot of different things, Charles. They're starting to pretty much just buy up, especially when we're in a recession. They tend to really start buying up everything.
Well, just to throw this out there to you, Those same three are major shareholders at CNN, ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, and two of the three are shareholders at Fox News.
Shocker.
So,
Absolute shocker.
Is there a, reason why the news wouldn't be going about this the same way that they should be? Why are they not covering this the way that they should? Because some of their shareholders are major shareholders in the company that is directly involved in this whole incident.
Yeah, so they don't want to make the train look bad since they own a portion of the train. They don't
Correct.
want to make the infrastructure the issue, because then they have to admit that they don't invest any money in people or infrastructure or anything.
Right.
So that goes without saying that again, here we are. You're always talking about special interests, Charles.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are with special interests in their hands in the front end and in the back end here. The train, the incident itself, holy crap, what do we do? Well, just call NBC, tell them, hey, just tell them there's a little mushroom cloud. It's actually very humorous, but it's sad too. There's a little mushroom cloud, nothing really to see here. It tell the governor to tell everybody it just dissolved. Mike DeWine, who by the way is a Republican. None of these people seem to care. That's the big issue, and they're trying to kind of brush it aside and put it in a place where, well, we did what we thought was best. I think there are going to be eventually major investigations into this. I think this will go on for a while, and most of it, Charles, is because of independent media like this kind of a channel that you and I are on, but bigger platforms probably that are pointing this out, like the Kim Iversons of the world, and good for her. I mean, there are people out there that are getting. I mean, Mark Dice puts out a video and he gets 500,000 views on it. And CNN, I think their nighttime viewership in prime time is something like 200K or something like that.
Yeah, and completely off topic, but I mean, since we're talking about CNN,
you don't have to.
You could say what you want about people in indie media like me and you. You could say, well, what do you know? You're just a working class guy in South Carolina. What do you know about the world? Okay. And they could say whatever they want about you, and they could say whatever they want about Kim Iverson or whatever. But you know what? I stumbled across something very interesting, because these corporate news folk, these type are they're always out there just preaching on this high horse about all these things that first of all, they're being paid a lot to go out and say. Let's just be honest. That's how they make their money. Anderson Cooper came from a very wealthy family, but he was not a trust fund baby. He was going to have to go out and make his own money. And guess what? He's a millionaire because of being this news anchor.
Yeah.
Okay. So he made his own money, but he's being paid a lot. And of course, the people who were paying them, well, we just established who were some of these shareholders, right? But to the point, people that they bring on that like to preach to the rest of us. Have you seen what the lovely Chris Cuomo just came out, and like the big headline that was attached to him, that but basically what was going on up here after they fired him from CNN?
I followed that story for a little while, Charles, but I let it go. I know he's over at he's over at News Nation now, which is supposedly the centrist news, and I've watched it a little bit, and I end up turning it off after.
But you didn't hear what he just came out with in like the last week and said in an interview with, by the way, with the mooch, Anthony Scaramucci. He went on his podcast and he give his thoughts, like when they, in his own words, when they shit canned him, pardon the language, this is his words here.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. When they fired him, he said on Scaramucci's podcast that he was ready to kill himself and everyone else.
What?
So this dude was basically going to go commit a Chris Benoit because he got fired from CNN. And this is who's out there preaching to us?
So you're making the point that these people, and then through this revelation here, that these people who are in these jobs, these media jobs, they're a little unstable. I mean, I just saw Tucker Carlson last night talking about Don Lemon, as he likes to call him, and
Oh
how
God.
he's having difficulty now with his co-hosts in the morning because they don't agree with him. They don't sit there and go, yes, Don, whatever you say. I mean, they're two women, right? And they have opinions and they differ from his.
Yeah.
And CNN, I'm still not going to be watching any CNN, but CNN realized that the business model of just destroying Donald Trump 24/7 wasn't really going to work for them. I mean, they're losing market share. And like I say, you got YouTubers that are destroying their ratings every single day. And so they made a little pivot, not a huge pivot, but they said, oh, maybe we'll try to be a little bit more centrist or whatever it is. We'll go center left instead of hard neo left or whatever that is. And it's, Charles, we're all fed up. That's my bottom line is we're all fed up. I mean, I get mad at Fox. I get mad at every news outlet, even Fox News. They've turned this story, Fox News. This is a headline from Fox News, and I had it here. China mocks Biden administration for being blind to the toxic mushroom cloud over Ohio while obsessing over balloons. So now, instead of focusing again on the people of this area, we're focusing on China's reaction to Biden. And so now what does that do for all the people who are, the war hawks? Oh, China. Oh, we got to get China. Okay, I get it. China, Ross Perot said this years ago that, we've been outsourcing everything and China is taking over. And this has been happening for decades, right? But to kind of instigate, we've got this issue with Russia. And now we've got the balloons. So now we've got an issue with China. And these people in East Palestine, there was a mushroom cloud, Charles, where there was fallout. There was literal fallout from the cloud. They measured it, okay? So there's an environmental catastrophe over there. Go to East Palestine. Okay, Biden is a corpse. He's walking around. He can barely complete a sentence. That's a bad thing. We shouldn't have that person as president. He should be... The 25th Amendment here should be at play. It just should be. I mean, they were talking about it with Trump, remember, because he's crazy. He's not mentally competent. So 25th Amendment. Well, here's a guy who can't say Pete Buttigieg's last name. He tried twice in the press conference. Couldn't say it either time. I'm not saying it's an easy name to say. I've probably screwed it up too. Just call him Mayor Pete, whatever. Just get over that last name part. But Charles, it's like, again, you made a really good point about who's funding these news organizations. Okay, how do we write a headline it's clickbait? Because you're going to go, China is going after Biden, and the Republicans are all like, good. But then the Republicans are like, yeah, we hate China too. So it's like, right. It's like, this is what you said at the beginning. We don't have a home. It's hard to find a political home. I mean, there might be one or two politicians, mostly probably more Republicans and Democrats, but I don't know, who say it's like a clock that's stopped and it's right a couple of times a day.
Right.
But here we go with a headline that takes the focus away and instigates. What's this going to be? We're going to have war with China, right? We're going to instigate China, and we're running drills in the South China Sea, and the military's out there, and we're going to go to Taiwan again, and we're going to say we love Taiwan. And a lot of people don't understand the foreign policy dynamic there. That China kind of owns them, but we're not going to be over there too supportive. It's kind of a strange sort of Monroe doctrine of China, basically. I don't know how to describe it. But what's your opinion on the headlines? I mean, let's just focus on the problem, dudettes,
Yeah. Well, again, first of all, let me back up to this for just a second, because we talked about this in our last video, and I said in that video that I wondered what they were trying to take our attention away from when they just kept talking about this balloon the whole time. You know what I came out, other than the things that we threw out there in that video? About a day later, I learned that they released one of the prisoners from Guantanamo Bay who had been charged with being in plot with the 9/11 attack.
Oh, wow.
Look that up.
I didn't know that at all.
Happened in the same little news week where we started hearing about that balloon. And I said at the time, I said, what are they trying to take our attention off of? Something's going on. If this isn't the first time these balloons have
Right.
come around, which and apparently, and I still don't know if I believe it because it seems a little far-fetched. I know we brought up if that thing was actually for weather purposes, and I really did not believe that. But now I'm even hearing some people like Aaron Matei report that, yeah, apparently it actually was, and that the United States was aware of it from the very second it took off
Yeah.
from China. And I'm like, wow, okay, so apparently, this, I guess weather technology is not as advanced as I thought it might have been if you still need to fly balloons around or something. I don't know. That seems like something from like the 1700s, where you had which way's the wind blowing today, and you had the rooster up on top of the roof or whatever, right? So but whatever. Ultimately, back to your points though. People have just have got to stop being sucked into all this stuff.
Right.
They've got to, the news is there to make money.
Mm-hmm.
The days of Walter Cronkite,
yeah, I know,
are long behind us.
Yeah.
Okay. That was when they expected news to not turn a profit.
Right.
That was back at a time when CBS, ABC, NBC, all these groups, they made their money off of the shows that were on TV, the Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah.
Sanford and Son, the Jeffersons, All in the Family, whatever, all the stuff that was popular, Three's Company, whatever, okay? This is what brought money in to those stations.
Yeah.
That's where the ratings came from. The news was just there as a public service. Now, it was established, Operation Mockingbird, all that. Yeah, the news has been used for propaganda purposes in the past, but they didn't expect the news to be TMZ. And that's what the news is today.
Yeah.
And as far as, Don Lemon is concerned, I've learned this in the brief time that I have been alive on this planet, especially in more modern times. It is generally not a good idea for a man to start spouting his mouth off about women or their functions or their behaviors or you're over the hill, especially in the presence of other women.
Right.
That's usually not a good idea. Now, think what you want of Nikki Haley. I'm not exactly rooting for her in 2024.
Yeah, she's 51 years old. Let's just be clear.
But right. But you going out in front of two other women and start talking about another woman and she's past her prime.
Stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what you thought that was going to get you, man. Like he's really going to have a hard time on this morning show if he keeps that stuff up. And the thing about it though, yeah, they gave him some pushback, but he ain't being canceled. Now, could you imagine if that came out of Donald Trump's mouth? And certain things along those lines did, like the stuff on Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh yeah.
And oh God, what's her name that used to host Fox News?
Megyn Kelly.
Yes, Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
Okay. When he would say those things, the world went nuts.
It did.
Okay. But Don Lemon over here is calling a woman past her prime. And yeah, he pisses off a few little co-hosts. But all that is the sideshow of things.
It is.
That's just a little bit of advice from Mr. Lemon. But
yeah.
Ultimately, people have just got to stop buying into this because this is not news anymore.
No.
These are a bunch of self-righteous, overpaid, in some cases morons, or some of them are just, snot-nosed. Okay. Somebody like, Anderson Cooper grew up with somewhat of a silver spoon at the very least in his mouth, coming from Vanderbilt's.
Right.
Okay. And they don't understand the struggles that the everyday person is going through. And the everyday person has got to stop just giving them all this attention, because they're doing the bidding of the donor class. They're doing the bidder of the sponsors. And who are those sponsors? Sponsors are people like Pfizer.
Yeah.
It's people like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing. Okay. And you look at what they're tied into: more war, and profiteering off of medicine.
There you go. Oh, don't get me started. I mean, I watch this channel on it's a Roku channel. It's Pluto TV.
Yeah.
And we watched maybe 2 episodes of Cheers last night, because I'm kind of an older guy and I like older sitcoms, like you were talking about the classics before. And those are the shows, by the way, that are so politically incorrect right now.
Oh, they would never fly in today's culture.
They just ban episodes too. They're like, oh, we can't show this episode. It's like, what? But anyway, I mean, it's free speech, alive and well, right? So anyway, in between, because they have commercial breaks, and we counted six commercials for pharmaceutical products that had all kinds of crazy side effects. They tell you, oh, this will help you if you've got diabetes, type 1, type 2, whatever. And then they go off on like 12 side effects. And I'm sitting there looking at the wife. I'm like, that's scary. I mean, I think I would just try to cope with whatever I have, and, maybe change my diet or do something, I mean, but this is, Charles, this is the last 3 years have proven to us that it's not about health, right? It's about profits. It's about, and this has been the thing for quite a long time, is that tell people, just tell people the truth. Hey, you're fat, lose some weight, or just, but you can't do that anymore. It's body shaming, it's like, what?
Oh yeah.
Well, get into that.
You could, if you wanted to go back and dig up old videos of mine, and even when I've come on your show in the past, I believe I've said this before too. So you can go back, like before the vaccine was ever created. I said, this is going to be just like the flu. When it plays itself out, it's going to be just like the flu. And the vaccine is going to be a flu shot.
Right.
And you got to get a flu shot every year. And in this case, well, why stop it every year? How about a couple of them a year instead? Because you got to be boosted. Okay.
Right.
You got to slow the spread. Okay. So you got to make sure you get that booster. It's money. And there's no profit to be made in money. Okay. There have been things that have come out. I did a video on this sometime last year, and this was an old video that I covered. I don't even remember exactly what this stuff is called, but it was used, I think, in cosmetics for a long time, and it was almost some kind of a powder. Yeah. But I remember seeing it was in a report in Canada News, and they tested it in rats. I'll have to see if I can get this to you after we finish this video today. But seriously, what they showed was that this could basically get rid of cancerous tumors.
Yeah.
So it could be used potentially as a great way to treat cancer. But then, of course, and even the news reported on this, so kudos to them. Nobody could patent it. This stuff had been around for so long that the patent protection was gone. And so basically anybody could make these generics with it, because there was no way that you couldn't patent this stuff. Okay. So because you can't patent it and you can't make a lot of money off of it, we're just going to leave it alone, and it never gets pursued because there's no money in cure. We got to come up with something that's a treatment. There's money in a treatment.
Yep.
And there's even more money when I can treat one thing and cause other things, and then you got to come back to me for something to treat those things.
Correct.
Okay?
That's the whole thing.
See that, and look, I like capitalism, but and I've said this for a long time. Unfortunately, I do think you have to have some kind of a mixed economy, because people are greedy, and it don't matter which way you go.
Yeah.
Socialism, communism, there's problems with that. and there's problems with capitalism, you've got to have, see, the founding fathers had it right in the sense you got to have checks and balances on things.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to have something over here as a measure to make sure that this system keeps running the way that it should. And in the case, it doesn't. One of the flaws of capitalism is when the greed of man kicks in just a little bit too much. Right. They're going to figure out how to play the game or get the referee to look the other way with a bribe or whatever to get what I want. Well, what I'm getting at here is medicine, cars, televisions, you name it.
Yeah.
Planned obsolescence has been a thing for a very long time. Okay? Yeah. Cars, let's make them out of cheaper stuff, but we'll make it look shinier so it's more attractive. And then we still charge more money for it, because you're buying all the accessories, but it's made out of a cheaper plastic, so it breaks easier, or the engine doesn't last as long as the old ones did. TVs, I mean, good Lord, those big, giant monster console TVs, a big wooden box. How long would those TVs last?
Decades.
How long does a TV last today?
Couple of years.
Planned obsolescence. Yeah. Okay. This stuff has happened over time. They don't care about just turning out the best product. Mm-hmm. They want to turn out something that's attractive for you to buy, but I want to make more money. So I'm going to need you to come back and buy something else. Right. So I want it to last you 20 years. I won't get your business again for another 20 years. Yeah. I want something where you're going to come back soon. And that's what this has literally turned into. So whether it be through medicine, there's no money in for me to cure you. There's money in it for me to treat you. Okay. That's the problem when you get these people that take control of these things. And then they buy the news. The news repeats their message. The news repeats their talking points. And then they put their money in the politician's pocket. And the politician goes to Washington, D.C. or the state level or wherever, and they regulate in a way or delegate, whatever you want to call this. I call it rot, if you want to know the truth. But they get in there and then they do things for those donors. Okay? Yeah. In the case of the DOD, it's either we got to be involved in a war or we need someone else to be involved in a war so that we sell it to them instead. Follow the money. Yeah. And if you're a regular person at home, you're going to have to come to the realization of just how much power that you have. Yeah. Look what the trucker stuff did up in Canada. Yeah. We need more of that if you ever want to catch somebody's attention. Right. But you can go to the ballot box and vote, 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. You're not going to get, because that system has become far too rigged. It's like playing the lottery at this point. The odds are so heavy against you in that, and there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes. Yep. The corruption is just in too thick. It's going to take, protesting. Let's start reforming more stuff at the local levels. Right. But it's also going to take more direct, quick action. I mean, you can't just be something that we work on over like the next 30 to 40 years, because I don't think you've got that kind of time. Yeah, no, absolutely not. But yeah, I mean, ultimately this stuff like this, everything that happened with this train and the problems that it caused, you can trace every bit of this back to greed in politics, special interests, and corruption. Rules being passed for some lobbyists, laws being passed. The lobbyists bought off the politician. So we're going to reduce this regulation because what they want us to do, no matter what safety risk it may cause for other people. Yeah. And we'll send billions of dollars to another country, but we don't want to invest money to make sure that our own equipment is operating at the best way that it could be, that these trains are safe. Mm-hmm. Okay. We don't want to give these train operators more paid days of sick leave so that they're not out there miserable with a bad sickness trying to do these inspections and operate these things. So many things could be done to make the situation better, and yet look where the priorities are actually at. I think that's about the last thing I can really add to the subject. But people have just got to wake up, and you're not going to get the true story from a news whose shareholders are the same shareholders that own these other corporations, because they're going to do the cover up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mean the tracks are rigged, Charles, just like you mentioned with other things. Everything's kind of rigged. I mean, and then
Right.
these people in this rural community who really don't have anyone in their corner, but think they do. They might, they chose. Look, I understand why people would choose Trump over Biden. I've been through this
Yeah.
over and over again. I get that. He did, talk about the working class. It's just how much of it really got to where it was supposed to go. And when you have a larger problem with, you mentioned briefly that there's kind of like this other entity out there that is essentially calling the shots. If anybody thinks that Biden is running the show right now, come talk to me and I'll tell you it's probably Susan Rice or it's Barack Obama or whoever. But it's not Joe Biden. And then it's people who have the money to influence those people to focus on these other issues instead of what's truly important to the people of East Palestine, Ohio. Right now, I don't know. I was telling my wife, it's like if I lived there, I'd be like, I think we're out of here. I think we got to find a way to get out of here. And that's hard for people that, are the mean income there is something like under 40,000. It's low. And so a lot of these people, they built a house or they bought a cheap house. They can't just, and who's going to want to go in there and buy their house other than these crazy conglomerates that you mentioned? Maybe they'll go in there and buy up all the land eventually.
Property value is going to be in the toilet from this.
Right. So these people are trapped literally, and the government should be like, this is where I think the government should step in, like, this is our fault. This is a transportation system. This is our infrastructure that we're supposed to maintain. And we've done zero. That's why China in this article, they're mocking. It does take the focus off of the problem, but they're not wrong about mocking. I mean, China is big on infrastructure. I don't care, if, I don't like communism, obviously, and there's human rights problems and it's bad. But for whatever reason, they've been able to build an incredible infrastructure over there. I mean, Trump used to go around talking about, how our airports suck and how this sucks. Donald, did any of it change? Did you start any kind of a, let's start a program? I hate to use the word program, but it's, it's a works project. Instead of sending $100 billion to Ukraine, start a transportation infrastructure project worth $100 billion. Put people to work and rebuild the damn country. Because I think this was an issue in 2016, Charles, crumbling infrastructure. Remember, we heard about crumbling infrastructure and what I'm going to do to fix it. And yes, building a wall along the southern border. A lot of people agree with that idea. But how about we rebuild some of the transportation? I mean, if you've got these tracks, Charles, and I think you mentioned it, 150 years old in some cases. That's ridiculous. I mean, come on. I mean, we're supposed to be, we got self-driving cars and stuff now, but we don't have trains that can stay on the track. So all of them, this is the black pilled moment for everybody. All of them are responsible for this. Democrats, Republicans, whoever's in charge, whoever's in the states too, governor of Ohio, DeWine, whatever your name is your state. You should be having people go down there and take a look at the infrastructure, and either the feds need to get on the ball or the states need to take some of their control back and say, you know what, I know this is a federal rail line coming through here, but we're going to put some money aside and we're going to, I don't know, you got to get the federal government's permission to rebuild tracks and to make it safe. So your citizens, because it's going through your state, and this town, which again is a perfect example of forgotten America. That's what this is. This is a forgotten rural podunk town, and it's right on the border of Pennsylvania, right? But it's still in a very rural area. And this is something the Beltway politicians, the people in the high-rise buildings in New York, they just, it's not my problem. That cloud, whatever it is, it's going to the south or to the southeast. It's not going to
Right.
hit DC. It's not going to go to New York. So they don't really care, Charles. That's the bottom
No.
line. They don't care. And it's sad, but we need teamwork. We need solutions. I hate to sound like this, politicians should get together on these issues. Put, your tribal, take your tribal gear off for 30 seconds and think of a mom and a dad and a young child trying to raise their young kids in a town that's now destroyed by toxic chemicals, most likely destroyed. I mean, I can't vouch for all the science there, but from what I'm hearing is this is going to be a long-term problem, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And the government should be all over this, saying, this is one of our jobs. Even if you're a libertarian, you got to admit that the government, they're supposed to, this is one of the things that they should be doing. Although these new anarcho-libertarian types are, the private industry will come in and fix it. Okay, well, find a contractor and get in there and start working. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be a solution.
Yeah. I've heard that argument. My problem is, and you could say this is fascism or whatever, where the corporation and the state come together. But my problem with just expecting private enterprise to come in and fix everything. I mean, private enterprise is some of the people who've already lobbied the government to not go in and do more of this safety regulation. And again, some red tape probably is unnecessary.
Oh, yeah.
But some red tape is there for a reason. You know what I mean? It's not everything that says, do not touch needs to be tampered with. Okay. And that's the thing with what I talked about earlier. And so, unfortunately, you need that checks and balances system, in my opinion, to make sure that not only are we turning things out for the good of our society, but that it's also being done safe for the people who have to live there.
Right. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, the rich and powerful just don't care about the issues of the working class people because they don't have to live through it every day. They don't have to deal with it every day. So they don't care. Right. They don't. And it's been that way for a long time. But, the thing is, and this is what's going to have to happen, just like after the Great Depression, and unfortunately, we're on the cusp of entering into another depression of sorts. Some have said we were already in one, but if we hadn't, we're heading that way.
Yeah. Working
people are going to have to realize that they've got power like they had back then. Okay. Yeah. And the same way that era brought about a lot of change for our society, we're going to have to do things like that once again. Okay. Now, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't think this time we're going to elect a president necessarily that's going to do it. Yeah. But it's going to have to start with the directive, direct action stuff first. To me, that's first and foremost. But you stole my thunder just a little bit, though, Dave, because when you were talking about all the infrastructure, and Trump saying he was going to build an infrastructure, I was waiting so badly to just come out and say, hey, he built a wall.
Yeah.
But,
he didn't finish, though, because,
that's the other thing. He likes to claim he built the wall, but he never actually got the wall finished. So, well, but yeah, it's just another sad example of where people like me, people like you, if something like this happened right now in my backyard, and I've got train tracks not far from my house.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, the train that comes through is owned by Norfolk Southern.
Great.
Yeah. So, I look at it like this. If that happened in my home, me and my wife aren't desperate, but I couldn't just up and move.
Yeah, I know.
And if I did have to up and move, I would have to sell my current house for decent value to even try to possibly be able to consider moving somewhere else. And here's the problem. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but the housing market is a mess compared to what it was just a few years ago.
Right.
Me and my wife bought our house here in South Carolina, and it's about 14 to 1,500 square foot.
Yeah.
3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, fenced in backyard, pretty good sized front yard. I got enough room in my backyard that I've planted 6 fruit trees, and I've got a section for a garden. I'll put it that way. I got some land. Okay. Yeah. I don't live on a farm, but I've got land.
Yeah.
$65,000.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
But today, you know, I get that little email, what my house is worth. Yeah, it's up over 100,000 now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got this for way less than it would be worth today. And so if I had to go buy a house somewhere else, those are the kind of prices that I'm looking at. Yeah. But if that disaster happened, like we just said, what's going to happen to my own property value? It's going to go. Okay. Exactly. So now what am I going to be able to sell this house for? Because nobody's going to want to live here.
That's correct.
Working class gets the short end of the stick once again.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time. It's how it's always been. And I know we're coming up for, if we hadn't already, you know, passed over 45 minutes here, but yeah, man, it's people have got to start working together along, you know, class lines, not party lines.
Yeah.
I've heard Jimmy Dore say that a lot. You got to start organizing along class lines. We're all working class people. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever. We're all working class people, and we still hold the majority. And we need to stop letting people paid by special interests propagandize us and indoctrinate us.
Yeah. That's good. Good advice. Excellent advice, Charles. That's good. Good stuff. Well, yeah, on that note, I think we're going to wrap things up. I think we did go over a bit, but you know, it's you and me.
Good conversation like always, though.
Yeah. I mean, but let's just hope the government does something for these people. I mean, it's it is the government's problem here. This isn't the people of East Palestine. They're minding their own business, trying to make ends meet, and there's a mushroom cloud over their town, and they're thinking, okay, who's coming to help us? And I think that's really, and it's not a matter of people not wanting to help themselves. You hear this a lot from the right. They say, oh, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm sure these people are going to do whatever they can, Charles, to try to mitigate the catastrophe, but this is bigger than just somebody being able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. This is a natural or unnatural disaster, we'll say, that was caused by the neglect of the government and not by the people who live in this town.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, give one last little quote here. I think it's some serious irony that if nothing else, this East Palestine, Ohio, and who would have thought that a Palestine in the United States would start having problems just like a Palestine somewhere else in the world? The people are getting shafted. Obviously, it's not in the same way, and obviously the people in the West Bank have been facing issues for a lot longer. But I just think of all the places and towns that this could happen, that it happens in a place where Palestine's in the name.
Yeah, I didn't want to go there, but yeah, I mean,
well, because I mean, it's not like they're getting bombed. I don't want people to think that I'm comparing the two as identical. I'm not. Right. I just think that there's an irony that is where this happened at. Yeah. And look at what's going on in that section of the world, and has been going on for a long time. And of course, we keep our nose in that business too.
We do, because it makes Raytheon a lot of money to keep our nose in.
Absolutely.
All right, Charles Anderson, as always, brother, great to have you. We're going to hopefully continue to do this every now and then. If you've got a little time off here and there, love having you on. Great conversation. And I'm hoping to see some videos at some point that you might be doing yourself, which would be great for folks to check out as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on again, Dave. If anyone wants to come over and check me out, I plan on trying to get at least 1 or 2 videos out this week, but you can find me over on YouTube at Lone Wolf Ace, I'm also over on Rockfin. Should be Lone Wolf Ace over on Rockfin also. And I upload the Odyssey, and Rumble,
Yeah.
but I haven't put much over there lately. But when I get back in the full swing, you can find me on all those platforms. So.
All right, sir. Very good. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, man.
All right. You too. Thanks for having me on again, Dave.